Hello and welcome to the Elite Health and Wellness Show. I am Boomer Cornwell, one of the owners and co-founders of Elite Health Online. And we have one of our favorite people with us today, Michaela. Michaela, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Boomer. Thank you for having me.
Good. Well, always. She's a great person to have, a wealth of knowledge as always, which is why you're going to continue to see her on here helping us out. So we've got a couple of topics we're going to go over today. The first topic I want to go over, though, is a little bit of a sensitive topic. It's a little bit of a controversial topic, I would say, more than sensitive. But this whole idea of, and it's a buzzword, right, or a buzz phrase called anabolic steroids, right? Well, there are anabolic steroids in this world. They exist for a purpose, and they're not all bad, right? So just to kind of level set with the audience, and then we'll get into some detail. It gets a bad rap because there were a group of, meathead bodybuilders that abused anabolic steroids in the 70s and 80s, and it gave it a really bad name. And it really gave it this terrible reputation that these are bad things. And that, if you take it, something terrible is going to happen to you. Or maybe it may even be illegal. So many people think that these things are illegal, and they're not. They're not, or the FDA wouldn't approve these things, right?
Yeah.
So these are, a better way of thinking about it, FDA-approved medications for certain things. And I want to get into that a little bit. But I just want to let the audience know, and anybody who may be thinking about joining us in our clinic, that, these are things that we certainly offer. Again, they are safe. We offer them in safe doses. That it's under the supervision of a licensed medical professional that we do these. But let's give some examples out. One of my very favorite of all time is oxandrolone. We've talked about that before. The one that we're going to talk about today is Winstrol, or otherwise known as stanozolol, right? And there's several others out there, but for these two, again, like I say, they serve a purpose. Okay,
Absolutely.
They address certain patient populations, and I kind of want you to get into that. But give us a brief history on a couple of these things. Where do they come from? Why do we have them? What were they designed to address before the meatheads got in touch with them?
So what is an anabolic steroid or an anabolic androgenic steroid? They are essentially synthetic forms of the male sex hormone testosterone. So it does assist with the downstream, masculinization, whether it's strength, endurance, and the subsequent effects of testosterone. I'm happy that you brought up the history and also subsequently the safety of these things. So these were originally brought into the market by FDA approval. So I know sometimes people are like, oh, they're bad for you. The FDA does not approve historically drugs that are bad for you. These all served a purpose, like you said. So in the 60s is when they started to really get big, particularly with the AIDS and the HIV epidemic. Patients would come in, and obviously with HIV and AIDS, you're bedridden, you lose a lot of muscle mass. And so they would use these anabolic steroids, particularly at the time Anavar. Which is, very safe, a very well-known anabolic steroid, which is similar to that of Winstrol. Well, with the HIV patients was also children who had, pituitary problems, or people, burn victims.
Yeah,
who
I've heard that.
Don't have a lot of mobility. They're losing a whole bunch of muscle mass. And so, like you said, with a licensed care provider's assistance, these are very, very safe. Of course, there is a side effect profile. But those can be, recognized with the labs work that your provider gives you.
And what medication doesn't have a side effect profile? A statin drug is going to have a side effect profile, right? You can't take a medication and there not be some type of either a negative aspect or something that we have to look out for.
Of course, but that's the best part about, that's why, and when we go back to safety, right? A lot of people, like these bodybuilders that you talk about, or people who get these substances from a third-party website, you have no way of verifying that's what it is.
Right, and that's what gives it the bad rap, because it's either a third-party website that who knows where that's really coming from, or it's coming from some, pharmacy down south of the border that is not being monitored by the FDA or DEA or anybody else, right? Or they're getting it, out of their buddy's trunk at the gym. Okay, that's what we want to avoid. That's what makes it bad, not the drug itself.
No.
That whole unsafe environment in which it's kept in traded hands is what makes it bad, not the medication itself.
Yes.
And to kind of add to what you were saying, there are situations like cancer treatment victims. From not necessarily today, I think it's still used a little bit in osteoporosis today, but in these anabolics were used back then to treat, like you say, burn victims, pituitary disorders. People who are going through cancer treatment, they were noticing a lot of skeletal muscle mass loss, right? Severe osteoporosis. And like I say, these are still used in some of those cases today.
Absolutely.
Well, so some of the latest update, coming down from the FDA is the fact that oxandrolone, or oxandrin in the commercial phase, is no longer going to allow to be compounded. Now, who knows why the FDA makes these choices, right? Personally, I think there's a little bit of an agenda behind it. Doesn't matter what I think. I have nothing to do with the FDA, clearly. So, a really good alternative to oxandrolone is going to be Winstrol, or again, stanozolol. I think I'm saying that
Yes.
right. Been around a long time. I want you to get into a little bit of the history of that. I personally have never taken Winstrol. I do at some point in time plan to do this. But before we launch this product and before we start telling our patients about this and answering the questions they may have, let's get into it and talk a little bit about it. So where did it come from? When was it created? What was it used for originally?
So Winstrol was developed in the 60s, 62, I think it was, by a company called Winstrol Pharmaceuticals. That is the United States branch of this pharmaceutical company. The UK branch is actually Bayer.
Yeah.
So a really well-known household name. Winthrop went on to be bought out by a bunch of different companies, including Sanofi, another really well-known name, and then finally was not produced commercially anymore, is now available through a compounding pharmacy. So I want to touch on that. A lot of people who are familiar with Winstrol might see it on Reddit or, some other form of communication. Please make sure when you decide to try Winstrol, it is a great alternative to Anavar. It's a great cutting agent, which we'll go on to talk about shortly. Please make sure that you're getting it with the guidance of a healthcare provider. Going back to side effect profiles, like you said, everything has a side effect profile. The key is finding a licensed practitioner who can monitor your levels and help provide you with other things that can help combat those side effect profile so that you can get the beneficial results that you're looking for.
Right.
Whether it's an anabolic steroid, whether it's a weight loss drug, regardless of what it is, side effects are everywhere. First, you need to make sure you're getting a real product,
right,
so you know what to look out for and you're given the guidance to have appropriate dosing and combat the side effect profile appropriately. So Winstrol actually is very popular not only in humans but also in animals.
Right.
So it is, I know we've spoken about this before, very common in horses.
Yep.
Actually, it's approved by veterinarians for wasting disease, or wasting sickness in animals.
In horses?
Or
animals
in general.
Okay, oh, interesting.
So it is commercially produced it's Winstrol V, or it has...
Yeah,
A lot
I
of
remember
these have
that. The
hundreds
bottles
of
used to say Winstrol V on it,
V.
which was for veterinarian, I think is what that,
Yes.
Yeah.
So, veterinary compounding does have a, certain rules about it. Veterinary compounding is one thing. You still need a prescription to get a veterinary compound. That is not the same thing as ordering from Peptide Sciences, where it might say approved for scientific or research use.
Right.
They are not the same thing. Scientific or research use means it comes from a facility that really cannot guarantee the safety and efficacy of it, and it's not even approved for use in animals. So, going back, the veterinary form, when compounded appropriately, is also very popular. It's not approved for use in racing.
Right.
Because it is a performance enhancer.
Right. So I want to touch on that. So it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. In fact, it means it works too well.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So much so in the animal world, much like the human world, simply because an organization that runs a particular scenario like horse racing, simply because they ban it doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that it probably works too well. And if you if somebody gives their horse this particular substance and nobody else does, well, then that horse has an advantage, right?
That's what they call it. It provides an unfair advantage.
Right.
So it does have its applications for use, though. Like we talked about prior, patients who have AIDS or HIV, patients who have it's essentially a human form of a wasting sickness.
Right.
You have significant muscle atrophy, you have a decline in quality of life, or maybe you're using it aesthetically.
Right.
Like I said, it is safe. It is a drug used with the guidance of your healthcare provider, can provide you with the quality of life, whether it's aesthetics, whether it's, muscularity or the male side effect profile that you're looking for. It can provide that for you.
Right. And so much like, to break it down into kind of, again, the human world, the major bodybuilding associations, and I think in sports, probably the biggest example would be Major League Baseball. Again, they banned these because it gave these athletes an advantage over the other athletes. They didn't ban it because they were bad and they were going to kill you or put you in bed for the rest of your life. They banned it because it was working too well.
Exactly.
Right.
And any healthcare provider will say, their number one thing is to do no harm.
Right.
No healthcare provider would write for something if the downstream product was to
Absolutely
produce harm. At least I know the healthcare providers at Elite wouldn't do that.
Right,
So
exactly.
I can confidently
Right,
say
that's
that.
right, exactly.
So these things do have an application, and as long as it's supported by, science data and dosing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other thing I notice sometimes, and I love Reddit. I think all the viewers who know me know I love Reddit. I love the anecdotal, supportive conversations that are in there. Dosing is so important, especially with Winstrol. It varies from women to men. When you get it in an oral form, it can be taken in an injectable form.
Is there a better modality or no?
It depends on the patient. Oral, it has great oral bioavailability. It's actually very molecularly, so it's derived from DHT.
Okay.
So dihydrotestosterone, which essentially means it's not susceptible to aromatization. Therefore, it's not going to convert into estrogen.
Nice.
Same thing with all anabolic steroids, anything anabolic, androgenic. If you supplement your body with something androgenic, your body's going to stop producing as much testosterone. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we would say, obviously, you need to talk to a healthcare provider, but you're going to be on a stack with testosterone on it as well.
Sure.
That does not mean, this doesn't aromatize, I should stop taking DIM. Or I should stop taking, if you're on anastrozole or finasteride. That does not mean that you should not stop your, the rest of your cycle just because you're on something that doesn't aromatize.
Right.
You're still going to be on those estrogen, modulators.
Yeah. You touched on something really important. You touched on men and women, right?
Yes.
So traditionally, I think that the majority of the patients, probably maybe even the people in our audience, believe that these types of things are only for men, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of our patient population was astounded to learn that women can take oxandrolone. Well, sure they can. The dosage is different, right? Maybe the intervals are different, but you can take them. Mm-hmm. So same is true for Winstrol?
Absolutely. And I'm a big proponent of medicine in women. I think oftentimes people think, even with libido boosters, with testosterone, with other hormones, I'm a woman, I don't need that. That's not true. Please reach out to a healthcare provider because women do need comprehensive reviews on metabolic health and particularly hormones, including anabolic steroids. Mm-hmm. Women have the right to look, the way that they want to as well. And thankfully, we have the means to those drugs now. So for men, you're usually going to see a 50 milligram oral dose. Mm-hmm. So it's most common. For women, you're going to see 20 milligrams.
And this is daily?
Daily dose, yes. It is a cutting agent. So if we want to get down to the nitty-gritty of it, most people, and again, this is used more in a bodybuilding rather than a powerlifting vertical. A lot of people say you're going to want to be in cutting season.
Right.
So this is going to be a drying agent, which will lead to, we'll touch on that when we lead to some of the more significant side effect profile. Mm-hmm. Women do not need to be as cut.
Right.
Typically women are lower, fat content anyways. Right. So you don't need to be as cut as women when you start your dose, but as a male, you're not going to want to be in a bulking season. We're going to dry you out, give you more lean muscle, more accessibility to strength and muscularity, and also increase your vascularity. So you'll see a lot more of the, your veins being visible. It does interact with a molecule called bradykinin.
Okay.
So bradykinin does help with, blood vessel regulation. Sure. We don't want your blood vessels to break. Right. Going off of that into, contraindications, the people who do not want to take this are patients who have, breast cancer, prostate cancer, hypercalcemia. Anabolic steroids can contribute to hypercalcemia. Okay. Yeah. And patients who have unmanaged blood pressure. Are the big ones.
Yeah, because the anabolic, like even oxandrolone can do that. It can take the blood pressure up a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. The other would be cholesterol. Winstrol is pretty well known for lowering your HDL. So you want to pay attention to what you're putting into your body.
Sure.
As with everything. I mean, the best advice I was ever given is to think about food like medicine. Mm-hmm. You want to, like we always talk about, you want to make sure that you're getting your medications, whether it's a steroid, a hormone, a peptide, from a reliable source. Same thing with your food. All medications have the ability to monitor, modulate your cholesterol levels, your, heart rate, which is actually you should be on arginine and citrulline.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly our cardiac formula.
Yeah, cardiac formula is amazing and a great alternative to, beta blockers. But
you touch on something there, so I kind of want to touch on one thing and come back around to what you're saying, because that is one thing that we consider the standard of care, right? Mm-hmm. Is our cardiac formula, the Elite Cardio formula, which is it's the carnitine and arginine, the citrulline, all that kind of stuff. And it's 2 caps per day. It's super uber cheap. Mm-hmm. It's one of the best things you can do. And so certainly, one of the things that we do, and I want you to get into this too, but like with the Winstrol, our providers are a firm believer in taking that with glutathione. So we'll touch on why we do glutathione and our cardio formula as well for the reasons that you just talked about. So let's dig a little deeper into the side effect profile, if you will, because again, like every medication in the world, there could be side effects of this. Some people may notice them, some people may not. Typically, for instance, what I will notice whenever I'm on a cycle of an anabolic is my joints kind of get a little bit achy because they're probably drying out a little bit.
Yes,
right?
That and you're putting on so much more muscle.
Okay.
You're putting on a lot more muscle, so we're putting a little bit more pressure on your joints.
Yep.
What would we suggest? We take a little bit more of a functional view of things. There's always the option for BPC. BPC is a great therapy for, any joint pain, anything that, maybe you have a smooth muscle or a tendon tear, supporting ligaments. BPC is a great option to help reinforce those. Alternatively would be things like a chondroitin.
Oh, yeah.
Or glucosamine. Glucosamine and chondroitin, you might see those again in animals. I give it to my dog. But he's got hip, he's a golden retriever, so they have, predisposed to hip dysplasia.
Yeah.
So, obviously hips and joints, we give glucosamine. It does take about 30 to 45 days to really build up your levels noticeably. So take this before, meanwhile, during your cycle. Vitamin D.
Sure.
You should keep your vitamin D up.
Everybody needs that anyway, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's just a baseline. I don't care what you're taking, or if you're not taking anything else, you need to be taking vitamin D.
Well, and I'm happy you brought up, the FDA's interaction. The FDA did recently make some new, rules.
Okay.
And guidelines for compounding pharmacies to follow. That includes vitamin D not being available to be compounded anymore.
Oh, interesting.
So, there are great oral options, or I believe there is a commercial option as well.
Okay.
But it is no longer available in an oil to be compounded. So that brings us back to...
Do you know why that is? Again,
I wish I knew what the FDA did it. I wish I knew.
It's kind of whatever they feel like,
Yeah, but it's like you said, everyone needs a little bit of vitamin D. So supplementing with a reputable source, whether it's Metagenics, Thorne, Pure Encapsulations, or a brand that you can get through Elite Health online.
Sure.
You obviously need a little bit of that. But, some people even will say MK677 or ibutamorin. I know it is considered more widely as a bulking because it does interact with ghrelins. However, it does have amazing results in osteoporosis.
The MK does?
The MK does,
Interesting.
yes. So a lot of people will stack MK before or during the end of your cycle.
Okay.
Because that's when, the first I've heard, Winstrol works very quick.
Right.
Very quick.
It does, okay.
People will report, hey, I felt great a week after.
Wow, that's quick, yeah.
Right? So the half-life is about 9 hours. But I've heard of people who will take, split the dose throughout the day and they don't report any significant side effect or differences in the benefits. But it takes a week to 2 weeks. People will really only be on the cycle for about 4 to 6 weeks because of the side effect profile. So it really is just the joint pain. You do hear a little bit about, some hair falling out.
Clearly,
yeah.
I've had that problem without the anabolics.
Well, anabolics and such like that, it does contribute to your hair falling out, which is why, you go through those cycles. There are topical options that you can use with, minoxidil to help hair regrowth. And also your thyroid. Make sure to check your thyroid. Yeah.
Which, again, is one of those things everybody should be doing anyway, because
regardless
of any type of HRT or wellness therapy, the thyroid's probably, if you're honestly, if you're probably above the age of 30, your thyroid's probably not functioning correctly.
Absolutely. There's a and I've said this a million times. I'm sure viewers get kind of annoyed with me saying it, but there's a comprehensive approach to any aspect of wellness.
Sure.
So anytime it's a hormone, anytime it's something that's affecting your overall metabolic health, it's very comprehensive.
And it's a balancing act too, especially when it comes to hormones, right? Because typically the way it works is if you get one hormone where it needs to be, another drops down or something, right? So to get that's why they call it, the old terminology was hormone balance, right?
Yeah.
Kind of doesn't really work. It's kind of really hard to balance your hormones, but nonetheless, everybody does in fact need that therapy. One more kind of little interesting tidbit on the side effect profile. So much like oxandrolone, I think one of the main side effects for Winstrol would be the liver enzyme issue, right? It could, in fact, elevate, in many cases will elevate liver enzymes, not necessarily to a toxic level, but it will elevate enzymes. That's the reason that we recommend the glutathione, right? So every patient that wants a prescription of this, once it's approved by, the licensed provider that they talk to, they will get a subsequent order of glutathione as well that needs to be injected once per week. So I want to hit one thing in a second. Talk a little bit about glutathione, though, because to the audience, they may be saying, well, what's glutathione and why do I have to take that with Winstrol? Yeah.
Sure. So, like most oral compounds that are anabolics, they are alkylated at a specific site, and therefore they are great bioavailability, but subsequently they survive the first pass through the liver. So that does lead to some of that, toxicity. Oxandrolone, on the other hand, is primarily metabolized in the kidneys.
Okay.
So we want to support the liver health, whether that's through, a capsule form. Glutathione, though, in particular, is one of my favorites. And we do have a previous podcast that goes a little bit more in depth on GSH or glutathione. If you'd like further information, please go ahead and take a look at that. But glutathione in particular is the final electron acceptor for the most part, the final detoxifier.
Okay.
So one thing that a lot of people don't really give to their, patient population is that we have genes for glutathione.
Oh, interesting.
We produce it naturally. So the precursor is NAC, which is available OTC.
Oh, yeah.
Glutathione is just the downstream product of that, and our body produces this to help with flushing out toxins, heavy metals, things that come into your bloodstream that really shouldn't be there. So it works amazingly in the liver.
Interesting.
It has great results, not just on your, it has amazing results all over. So you're not just using it for your liver. It has great neuroprotective events. It does help with your eyes, your skin, your hair, skin, and nails.
That's what we hear a lot of our female patients say is that their skin, all of a sudden, my skin and hair look great.
Yeah, well, it's a shame that we don't know enough about it because they use it so much in, Asian countries as well.
Oh, do they?
To help with overall, metabolic health, but also it's such a strong antioxidant that it'll flush out hyperpigmentation in your skin.
Oh, wow.
So it does give you a bit more even skin tone. But in this particular case, you want to make sure that you're supplementing with, B6 and those vitamins that help with the first phase of detox. But your second phase of detox is going to be things like glutathione, which are going to help flush out, similar to the way that it would in like fatty liver disease, whether it's non-alcoholic or alcoholic fatty liver disease. Glutathione does produce amazing results in both cases.
Wow. Very cool. Okay. Well, again, glutathione, in my opinion, is one of those things that everybody should be on anyway. I mean, it's a really good compound to be on. It's uber cheap, again, and it's super easy. It's one injection per week, super easy. So, and certainly, going to be very necessary when you're doing something like this for sure. So, last topic, you touched a little bit on the fact that most patients will be on this 4 to 6 weeks, under the care of a medical professional. Some providers are okay with extending that a little bit to maybe the 10 to 12 week mark, but certainly not beyond 12 weeks. And so, talk a little bit about why that is and what is the time frame, because it's not something you just can do once, right? I mean, you can do it again, but there does have to be a time frame that we wait in between. We can't, it's not like you're off of it for 2 days or even a month and get right back on. I think the typical recommendation is once you're finished with your Winstrol cycle, you're going to wait 3 months.
About
right?
about. Yes. 8 to 12 weeks. But that's the best part about working with places like Elite is you have the accessibility to your healthcare provider. So we're not just going to give you 12 weeks of therapy and tell you good luck, have a great time. It's more so, the side effect profile does vary. Some people don't have any joint pain and they're like, I would be on this for as long as I my script lasts, and then I'll come back and ask for more. Right. Some people after, 3 to 4 weeks are like, okay, I'm going to take a break. Maybe I'll swing back to it. So it does depend on how you react to the medication. Regardless of that, it is an anabolic steroid. We want to give your body some ability to recover. But it comes back to a comprehensive approach, Sometimes people get a little worried where they're like, okay, I'm coming off, but now what?
Right.
There are great options on the other hand, like, CJC, ipamorelin, MK677, other agents that can help you in the interim that your provider can help coach you on and advise for you. But you're going to want to take at least 60 to 90 days in between cycles just because of the hepatotoxicity, and you're going to want to give your body some time to recuperate. Right.
Exactly. That's right. Well, and also, too, just as a last point here, and then we'll wrap up, is, the purpose of doing something like this, the purpose of an anabolic like a Winstrol or even an oxandrolone, which is unfortunately going away because it was my all-time favorite. Yes. But, the whole purpose of it is during that time to get the effects. Let's build some lean muscle mass. Let's build up our joints a little bit, even though they may hurt. Let's, it's gonna peel some weight off of you, that kind of thing. And those benefits are going to be there while you're on this medication.
Absolutely.
Once you stop taking the medication, you're going to feel like a lot of it goes away, and maybe some of it does. Maybe you don't have quite the muscle building capability that you did while you were on the cycle. Doesn't mean you're going to lose it all necessarily, unless you just go back to old habits and bad habits and start eating terribly or something. But for the most part, it's really more of a sense of feeling. It's not necessarily happening, right? So if you, for instance, whenever I would take oxandrolone for a couple of months and then come off of it, for the first week, I would feel oh man, I've lost all the effect of this. I just completely wasted that money and that time. And it's not true. You don't necessarily do that, right? So it's important to still maintain healthy habits, but also realize too that the reason you're not going to feel as good as you did is because you're just simply no longer on the medication, right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean you're losing anything, and it doesn't mean that anything's going away, again, unless you go back and resort to those bad habits.
Yeah, well, and it goes, I know we have a lot of podcasts about weight loss, which is, such a key and huge thing in today's, society. But I think it was in the studies that people would gain, over a 3 to 4 week period, up to 10 pounds of lean muscle mass,
I've read
which
that.
is a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, which explains, your joints might hurt a little bit because you have so much more muscle. But, like we do with everything else, take your time while you're on it to recognize, okay, this is how I feel, this is what my lifts are, this is, what I'm eating, this is how, I'm treating my body, and continue those habits even while you're not on the drug. Granted, you might not feel the same, which is, that's the way it is when you're on and off a drug, but at the end of the day, the biggest concern is, your safety, mental health, and, your physical health. So we're going to cycle you off for your physical health. Meanwhile, you can get on another alternative substance that can help you, in the interim. And you can always cycle back on or try one of the many other things that
for
are
sure.
offered.
Well, and to your point earlier too, it's really a good idea to save something like this. Given the efficacy of it and given even the side effect profile, and you want to be careful, save it for a time whenever you can be religious in exercise, religious in your diet. You are kind of like in a cutting phase, so maybe just before that summertime kind of area, maybe the springtime. The holidays are coming up. That's not my cutting phase, right?
No.
So I'm not going to do this, in November and December, because that's not going to do me any good. I'll be wasting my time and my money. But certainly.
Yes.
Before the sun comes out next year, certainly that's going to
And
be
I get
happening,
asked
so.
oftentimes, particularly people who are in competitions, how long will this last? So, there is a 9-hour oral half-life, but that does not mean the same thing as, what's metabolites are detectable in the urine. So at a low dose, 5 to 10 milligrams orally every day, it was detected 10 days after.
Okay.
Metabolites were up to 10 days after in the urine. So at 50 milligrams, you could anticipate, at least 30 to 45 days after. Just something I get asked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And that's a really good point. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose the effect of it overnight. Now, again, if you gain, 10 to 15 pounds of muscle, you might lose 3 or 4 of it, right? So that's kind of what you're feeling. But in all honesty, though, for to have those metabolites still detected 30 to 45 days out is still pretty quick in my opinion.
When
There's
compared to,
medications that'll last a long time.
Like
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's another great wellness drug. Something that, like we touched on earlier, people get a little nervous about anabolics or even things that are considered off-label.
Right.
Off-label therapies, tretinoin. Tretinoin is arguably the number one thing used off-label. They use it for acne, but wrinkles. People use it every day for wrinkles. Don't be scared of something just because it's an off-label therapy. These things would not be approved for use if they weren't approved and verified as safe and efficient through the FDA. And your provider, especially at Elite, would never prescribe you something without understanding its benefits and the potential side effects and preparing you for them.
Well, absolutely. And, on the off-label thing, I come from a medical sales background and a little bit of pharmaceutical, not a whole lot. But, there are pharmaceutical companies out there, big names, that have a whole, sales and marketing strategy around how to sell something as an off-label product.
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means, we found that, even though it was intended for this use, it could also be used for this over here.
Well, and it's so expensive. It takes a long time to get FDA approval for things.
It does.
So you say, it probably takes what? At least 2 years for
if not 4.
peer reviews.
Yeah.
And then tons of money to even get the approval.
That's right.
So a lot of these things might be older drugs, like metformin, right?
Yeah.
Or my personal favorite's rapamycin.
Oh, yeah.
Rapamycin has FDA approval. They're not going to, it's an older drug. They're not going to go and FDA approve it for something else at this point because there's not. They don't have anything to really gain from
Well, and that's really good. So rapamycin, which I'm taking, and it's a great anti-aging medication, but I think it was originally for organ failure or organ rejection, rather. So simply because you're taking it doesn't mean you're an organ rejection. It means you're in an anti-aging, right?
Yeah.
It just has so many other benefits to it. And, the last point that I'll make is, when we talk about certain things, certain medications, again, I go back, we're talking about the anabolics today, so I'll stick on that, is when we talk about the toxicity to the liver or toxicity to the kidneys, which may not even be the right terminology, we do so many other things that are so toxic to our liver and our kidneys, In my opinion, the number one most toxic thing you could do to your liver is drink alcohol. Well, how many times do we go out and have a couple of drinks at night or on the weekends especially, right? Or during the holidays, something like that. and I think any provider who has studied this will tell you, is far worse than really any of the medications. I'm not going to say everything, but any of the medications that we certainly have on, at Elite Health Online.
Mhm.
I mean, people do way worse things to their bodies. So don't get caught up, in this idea that, oh, I'm taking this medication, it's going to make my liver malfunction.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Mhm.
The gin and tonic you had the night before was worse for
Absolutely.
you, right?
Well, and like we've touched on, as long as you're using these things under the guidance of a healthcare provider, it's coming from a reputable source where this is actually Winstrol. It's not something that's supposed to be used in dogs or
Right.
just for research use, because I got it from my friend's trunk. Don't do
Yeah,
that,
don't do
please.
that. Don't do that. Yeah.
And your provider can tell you, hey, you should take a liver. We're measuring your ATL, your
Mhm.
liver
Sure we
enzymes,
are.
or we're measuring your HDL, your lipoproteins,
Sure.
your lipid profile. Here are the things that we want you to take to combat these, so that this medication, while it's already safe, we're making it safer, less toxic on your body. But anytime you tell, I'm gonna go get a drink, no one tells you, hey, make sure
Yeah.
you take, you're injecting yourself with glutathione after, or
Right.
you're
Yeah.
taking,
Milk thistle.
NAD, right,
Right.
to help supplement. They're not really gonna guide you that way. Medicine, food, drink,
Mhm.
like I said, if you think about it like medicine,
Right.
it's something that you're putting into your body, and that includes, like driving.
Mhm.
Because we spend so much time in our cars where we're surrounded by toxins,
Sure.
gases, and the
Oh
likes.
yeah, the environment itself. Sure.
Yeah, glutathione. Like I said, we had genes that are programmed. Well, we don't have all of them turned on, because when humans were first, produced and started evolving, they didn't have all these environmental toxins. Heavy metals
Right.
were in the ground, not here up and around
Right,
us.
for us to breathe.
Yeah, for us to breathe
Right,
all day.
yeah.
So taking
Fine.
these, glutathione is an amino acid chain, essentially. Taking
Mhm.
these amino acids, supplementing your body with the right things will help combat any of the side effect profiles. So it's nothing to be scared of, provided that you're using it under the guidance of a healthcare provider, and you're using it appropriately. We're not abusing the dose.
Right.
And you're being honest with yourself and your healthcare provider.
Yeah.
We don't have anything to prove. At the end of the day, I think the end goal is just to make sure that, you feel the best that you can be, and that you're being really the CEO of your own health. And we're taking care of you physically.
Yeah, absolutely. CEO of your own health. I love that. So that's a phrase we don't use enough, but we need to have it stapled on our forehead around
Yep.
here. So, well, I really do appreciate your time today. I appreciate the information as always. This is always a really good segment when we have Michaela here. So, as always, folks, go to www.elitehealthonline.com. You can click on the Get Started button if you know that you want to get started with us. Otherwise, if you have a question, there's a Got a Question button. You can book an HOS with one of our hormone optimization specialists. They'll reach out to you at a time of your choosing, tell you everything about us, everything that you want to know, answer your questions, get labs ordered for you, get you set up. Remember, labs are free, consultations are free. The only thing you come out of pocket for is the therapy that the provider recommends. And if you decide not to go with therapy, then everything is of no cost to you. So couldn't be easier than that. I don't think the barrier could be any lower. So again, elitehealthonline.com, click on that Get Started button, and we'll see you online. Thank you.